Hello everyone, I am Berdish and this is Epic Tabletop, when we strive to give you the best hobby experience. Now, today some painting. I'm not doing this very often for two reasons. First, I'm not an artist, so I'm not sure if you guys are interested in this kind of painting. I mean, I'm pretty much skilled, I think, in painting, like, batch painting, painting lots of miniatures to rather, good skill when it comes to tabletop. Well, if you actually will appreciate this material, I'll probably do more. But there is other reason. The other reason is that I lack hardware to record it. I mean, well, obviously I do have some, but the things that I do have doesn't make the recording very comfortable. So yeah, I struggled during the paint. Anyway, I tried this time, and I think the material is rather good. I mean, I do hope. Well, tell me if it is. So basically, let's just dive into it. One more thing, I would kindly ask you to consider subscribing to my channel. Also liking the materials, well, if you do like them, and commenting, because this helps immensely. Give me fuel to actually do more, and it also fuels infamous YouTube algorithm. Now, let's just start painting. Please remember that if you are interested in a particular part of the material, you can use progress bar and timestamps visible there to jump to any video chapter that you desire. Also, if you like what you see and hear, please remember to subscribe. It costs only a few seconds of your time and means a world to me. I wanted to get me some new orcs for Warhammer the Old World. The GW old plastic kit is okay, and I even still got some sprues from the old days, but I've decided to go the other way. In my days I have painted many GW plastic orcs, and I simply want to do something slightly different. I want orcs that have similar feel and look, but are not GW, to put it bluntly. Other very important thing is that I wanted it to be 3D printable. So after some researching, I was left with two choices: Highland miniatures or Avatars of War. I have decided to go with Highland miniatures. Avatars of War are great and I will use them as well, most likely. Still, for my ordinary orcs, I like simpler Highland sculpts. Now, Highland orcs are bulkier than GW, and when printed in their natural size are more like GW ogres, so I decided to shrink them to 88% of their original size. This way they will fit better with GW minis and other brands that I have in mind or prepared for Warhammer the Old World. Once I decided on the course of action, I set the whole thing in motion. First, I printed my chosen brand of minis. Using my FDM printer, I produced some bases for my new orcs. I decided to stick with 25mm and later on appropriate movement trays in order to fit with the new base dimensions. Now it was time to do some planning. I started to glue the minis to their bases in order to see how they rank up. I mean, I knew that I will have some spare space since the movement tray will widen the gaps between orcs. Still, it didn't hurt to see if they fit nicely next to each other on their 25mm bases. As you can see, there was no problem there. Next thing was to decide if I want to attach shields and weapons before painting. I went with weapons only. Shields will be painted separately and attached later on. While affixing weapons to my orcs, I was paying attention to differentiate those between same orc sculpts, meaning same looking orcs would get different weapon. Upon finishing this task, I grouped the same sculpts together. I wanted to make sure that not only held weapons will make them look different, but also color scheme. So keeping them like this will make it simpler to paint and not to repeat colors in the same pattern or the same looking orc. Now when it comes to actual painting, you can see there is one orc that is already painted. This was my proof of concept. I decided to use the fewest colors possible, and all my orc warriors will be painted the same way. I mean, apart from skin and metal parts, all clothing will be done with 3 colors: black, brown and sand, as you can see on this very model. Of course, not necessarily in the exact same pattern. I mean, some tunics will be brown, some sand, some black, and so on. I mean, you get the idea, right? Now, let's get painting. Because I was planning on using some speed paints, I started by dry brushing all the minis with medium grey and then pure white. I'm using Armor dry brush paints for this purpose. I bought them long before Army Painter Fanatic range became available, and I like them very much, but you can of course use Fanatic range paints. Their dense and thick out-of-pot consistency will do just great with dry brushing. All the thing, as you can see, is that while painting 3D prints, I dropped completely any kind of priming. So far my observations tells me that paints stick to somewhat porous 3D printed resin surface very well, and there is no need for priming in the normal sense, normal way. Small thing, but saves time. When it comes to dry brushing, I do heavy first layer using circular movements. This is to cancel out the visibility of the layers that were created during printing, as well as to give a uniform appearance so that the direction of the brush is not visible, if you know what I mean. Mentioned layers are pretty much non-existent on newer printers, but they are visible on my Mars 2 prints, so techniques like washing or dry brushing will make those layers more visible. I mean, it's not a big thing, literally and otherwise, but if I can hide them using simple techniques, why not do it? Now, white dry brush is much lighter and directional, if I may say so, mostly done with movements from top to bottom. I also use some stippling on surfaces facing up, as if light is coming from that direction. So if you are thinking this is like prepping for slap chop, it is. But like I mentioned before, I will not use speed paints all over. This prepping draws out details and is giving me a sort of primitive lysing map. And there you have it. 19 orcs dry brushed and ready for some color. I started with the skin. For these orcs I will use mix of 2 Army Painter speed paints, Zealot Yellow and Orc Skin, mixed in 1:1 ratio. Nothing really fancy here, just applying the mix to all skin areas without tilting other surfaces. It's rather simple with these minis since all the areas are rather prominent and well defined. Worth mentioning is that I am still using, for the most part, speed paints from the first iteration, so I don't want to spill to other areas in order to avoid famous or infamous speed paint reactivation. If you are using newer speed paints, number 2, you don't have to be worried all that much about it. For the record, I never really had a problem with that reactivation thing. I actually used that property quite a few times. Still, considering pros and cons of the reactivation, I am now leaning toward not having it. Therefore, speed paints number 2, here I come. Eventually. Okay, done. I mean, we will come back to skin painting, but for now, 18 more orcs to cover. And by the magic of YouTube time travel, here they are. Now we will paint our first color, according to my proof of concept like I presented before. I will start with the hoodie on this orc with a sandy color using Army Painter Fanatic triage system. In this case I will use 3 colors from ochres and tans. Those will be paints numbered 1, 3 and 5 subsequently. I really really would like to say a few words about this system. But before I start, I would like to stress out that I am not affiliated with Army Painter in any way. I bought all the products myself and all the expressed opinions are my own. So, to be blunt, I love Army Painter products. The current ones. Before Speed Paints #1 appeared on the market, I had zero Army Painter stuff. Now these paints, I mean Speed Paints and Fanatics, are pretty much only paints that I'm buying. Of course, I'll still have Vallejo, AK, ammo and even some leftover GW, but moving forward I do foresee sticking to Army Painter for the most part. Why is that? Because Fanatic range is just superb. I mean, paints themselves are not better than AK 3rd generations, for example, but they are as good or at least good enough for me. What I love about them is a triage system, and this thing is not getting enough publicity, in my opinion. There are plenty of painters on YouTube talking and expressing their appreciation about new-ish Army Painter Fanatic range, but not that often they are talking about the triage system. Well, to be honest, famous YouTube miniature painter, whom I really appreciate, said, and I pretty much quote, "I couldn't care less about triage system." Well, his skill is so much above my own that I'm not sure if I'll ever reach it, but on the other hand, artists like him often refer to few minis that they paint as an army. So my point is that if you are painting one mini, or let's say 15 of them, you can mix and match colors in order to find this perfect shade you are looking for. But if your project involves some 150 plus minis, let's say, you start to appreciate a lot a system in which you have shades of the same color that complement each other well and do not require from you to mix anything. Even more important is that with such system you can easily return to a given project without worrying that you won't be able to mix and recreate the same colors you used before. So for me this is a huge thing. I actually used to spend a lot of time discovering for layering purposes what colors will go with each other well. And when I say layering, I don't mean tens of layers and smooth transition, I mean 3-4 layers top that will make minis look great on tabletop. So now Army Painter did all that research for me, and that makes me very happy and grateful. Okay, for the record, I know that such systems existed already, like Wargames found the triage system, yet accessibility and overall product presentation by Army Painter is, in my opinion, the best so far. This doesn't mean that I will never mix colors ever again, but when I'll be painting, let's say, Napoleonic era army, I will surely follow one of Army Painter triage sets. Okay, I hope you get my point. There are aspects of a new-ish Army Painter range I would like to discuss further, but let's do this another time. Now let's get back to orc painting. As you can see, I finished Hoodie on one orc, and now I'm painting the same sculpt with the same color but on a different part. And since this is an exercise in patch painting, this continues through the whole unit of our orcs. We stop when each and one of our green warriors have some part of his clothing painted in our chosen first color. Then of course we do a second color. In my case it will be Oak Brown. It is the darkest shade in the Ruddy Browns set. Well, if I could name some faults with Army Painter Fanatic range, then it seems to me that many darkest colors are not that dark, in fact. I could gladly accept some darker shades for some of the sets I currently own. Anyway, this continues again until all of our orcs have some brown included in their wardrobe. Then I did metal parts, weapons, helmets and bits of chainmail. I'll use Army Painter Plate Mail Metal Paint, which is a new metallic formula, supposedly groundbreaking. I don't know about that, but since I got it I use it very extensively. It does have a nice consistency and coverage. Also, it does flow from the brush in but a nice smooth way. Next thing that I wanted to do is to use speed paint on some of Orc's parts, but before I'll proceed, a little tidying up is required. With a light grey paint from Army Fanatic range, I'll clean the areas that I had soiled when laying down the previous colors. Now boys are ready for some speed painting. I'll use mix of green black mixed 2-to-1 with grey road grey. Mixing will thin the black, obviously, giving it basic look of somewhat worn down black leather. Okay, so now the real fun begins. I mean, we do have pretty much all the basic colors. Well, in case of speed paints we have more. So what I mean is that we did just one pass with all of our chosen paints. This is batch painting video, but let's stick with one orc for now. So we will finish his hood and pants. Of course we will use army paint and triage system in order to achieve great results with not much effort. For the hoodie we will use paints from ochre and tan set. We already used the darkest paint from this range. Now for highlight we will use desert yellow and then burnt turf for extreme highlight. Desert yellow will pretty much cover all of the initial shade, leaving it in the recesses. It's easy enough task. I mean, you can clearly see on this model where to paint and where to leave the way that is already painted. I'm using horizontal brush strokes and dabbing motions, as you can see. While painting, usually I'm trying to think about the fabric that I'm covering, adding with my paint to a texture of a given material. Our first highlight is ready, and I think the hoodie already looks pretty damn good considering the effort. Now the pants with the same philosophy. We will use Dryad Brown over the Oak Brown that is already there. Hoodie is now dry, so let's do fine highlight on it. I paint areas that I think would catch light the most, but also I'm trying to add to visual interest of the miniature. After finishing, again we go back to Orcish pants, finishing with Ruddy Amber. And here it is, our orc with his wardrobe pretty much finished. The last big thing is the skin. Now, we painted it with a speed paint, so if in a hurry we could leave it like this, but adding highlights to it will make it pop a bit more. I will use two paints from Army Painter Fanatic range, namely Wild Green and then Ferocious Green as a final highlight. These are coming from the Deep Greens set. Principle is again rather simple. Using stippling for the most part, I'm adding the paint to the regions that I want to highlight. Those would be places catching more light, but also areas of stretched skin, like on his knuckles, bulging muscles, brows, or top of his head. With the final highlight, I simply go over the same places I just finished. I just cover less space. So here is our chop, almost done. Left are the details I've mentioned, like these nails on his hoodie, his teeth and claws. There are some leg wraps on some of the orcs, and of course I need to finish their weapons. I suppose I should mention that all of these actions I also did for remaining 18 orcs. Shields that we left separate need to be treated as well, of course. I dry brushed them in a similar fashion to orcs and applied green speed paint mix to hands holding the shields. I didn't bother with highlights since those parts of our orcs will be hardly visible. When it comes to wood itself, I'll use speed paint dark wood mixed with speed paint medium in 3:1 ratio. This will give me washed up and worn look straight away without any additional highlights. The final effects look like this. And for this project I'll leave it the way it is. The wood I mean, because I'm planning to put some color on the shields, yellow namely, in form of simple dags or just worn out paint. As for the most of this project, I'm using Army Painted Triage system. This time it is from the yellow set, starting from the darkest color and continuing with the paint number 3 and then 5. With the initial layer, coverage is pretty thorough but not perfect. I'm leaving some gaps and I'm not trying to push the paint in between the wood cracks, thus creating worn out effect. Next layer covers less space, but otherwise continues with mentioned principle of not being 100% thorough with coverage. The last layer is of course the lightest and smallest in terms of area covered, but otherwise done in the same fashion as previous two. The weapons, I kind of omitted the fact that I washed all metal parts of our orcs with a mix of army painted dark tone and strong tone, mixed in ratio 1:1. After consideration I decided to give another wash of dark tone to weapons only. After it dried, I simulated crude but effective sharpening marks on the blades. I also marked edges with somewhat jagged edge highlights and added some scratches to add the visual interest. What was left was the standard and rather substantial number of rope-like things entangled on weapons and on the mentioned standard that you can see here. Unfortunately, these ropes doesn't have any texture on them, which make them look more like cables. I suppose I know why they are sculpted this way, but it doesn't change the fact that they do not look very great. So as you can probably see, I painted simple patterns simulating somewhat rope twist. From the tabletop perspective, it looks convincing enough. Here we have another example of such ropes entangled on a weapon. Like I said, they look convincing enough, I would say. When it comes to painting the standard, I couldn't decide on anything in particular, so I decided to leave it red for now. I mean, we used 3 colors to make it less two-dimensional, of course. These were paint 1, 3 and 5 from Cool Red's Fanatic range. And that's pretty much sums up the whole unit. Now, big, not so much, but still, reveal. That's it for today. Let me know in the comments if you liked it so I can decide whether to prepare more similar materials. Of course, not only thematically related to fantasy. I will paint some historicals for sure. For now, take care and until next time, cheers!